The alien military academy floated in orbit around a massive gas giant. Lightning flashed inside the planet's storms below, lighting the station in cold blue light. This academy was known across the sector as the hardest training ground ever built. Only the strongest survived its trials. Many species had tried. Many had failed. Today, the main gravity chamber was full. Cadets from different worlds stood in a wide metal arena. Some were tall and armored with natural plates. Some were thin with extra limbs. Others were short but heavy with dense muscle. They all had one thing in common. They believed they were strong. At the center of the chamber stood something different. A human. He looked simple compared to the others. No claws. No armor. No glowing eyes. Just a plain training uniform and calm expression. His name was Ethan Cole. He stood with his hands behind his back, quietly observing the room. Whispers moved through the crowd. That is the human. He looks fragile. I heard their world has higher gravity. That does not matter here. Above them, behind reinforced glass, academy officers watched carefully. The chief drill sergeant entered the chamber. He was tall, broad, and covered in heavy ceremonial armor. His voice echoed through the room. Welcome to endurance evaluation. His eyes locked on the human for a moment longer than the others. Gravity will begin at 1 standard unit. The floor vibrated softly. Many cadets adjusted their stance. A few stretched their limbs. The human did not move. 2 units, the sergeant ordered. The pressure increased. Some cadets grunted. A 4-armed warrior dropped one knee to the ground. The human shifted his weight slightly but remained relaxed. The sergeant noticed. 3 units. The air felt heavier. Breathing became difficult. 2 cadets collapsed fully and were dragged away by drones. Sweat formed on alien faces. The human blinked once and rolled his shoulders slowly, as if warming up before exercise. Murmurs filled the chamber. The sergeant's jaw tightened. 4 units. Metal creaked under the pressure. More cadets fell. One tried to stand but could not lift his own body weight. The human exhaled slowly through his nose. His boots pressed firmly against the floor. His knees bent slightly to adjust balance. But he did not fall. 5 units. Now only a few remained standing. The human raised his head and looked at the sergeant. Is this the first phase? He asked calmly. The room froze. No one spoke during gravity trials. No one had the breath. The sergeant stepped closer, his heavy armor echoing across the floor. You find this amusing, human? Ethan shook his head gently. No, sir. I was expecting more resistance. Several cadets stared at him in disbelief. The sergeant's voice became colder. 6 units. The chamber lights flickered as power increased. The pressure forced even the strongest alien to collapse. Bones strained. Muscles trembled. Only one figure remained upright. The human's breathing became deeper now, but steady. His back remained straight. Sweat formed on his forehead, yet his eyes stayed focused. Officers behind the glass checked their monitors repeatedly. His vitals are stable, one said. That is impossible, another replied. The sergeant felt something unfamiliar rise inside him. Doubt. He walked directly in front of Ethan. You will kneel, he said quietly. Ethan looked at him, respectful but firm. Permission to remain standing, sir. The sergeant's eyes narrowed. Around them, every other cadet lay on the floor, unable to move. The sergeant raised his hand toward the control panel. Very well, he said slowly. Let us increase it. The gravity core began to hum louder. Warning lights flashed along the chamber walls. Somewhere deep inside the academy, engineers looked up from their stations. The number climbed again. And the human did not even flinch. The gravity core hummed louder as the number climbed. 7 units, the drill sergeant announced. The pressure inside the chamber became crushing. The air felt thick, almost solid. The few cadets who were still conscious pressed flat against the floor, unable to lift even a finger. Emergency drones moved quickly, pulling broken bodies toward the exits. Only 2 figures remained upright. The drill sergeant. And the human. Ethan's boots sank slightly into the reinforced metal floor. Fine cracks spread beneath his feet. His muscles were clearly working now. Veins stood out along his neck. Sweat rolled down his face. But he did not kneel. Behind the observation glass, officers stared at their screens. Structural strain increasing, one engineer warned. The chamber is not designed for prolonged exposure at this level. Monitor the human skeleton density, another officer said. Numbers flashed rapidly. Bone stress within safe parameters. That cannot be correct. Inside the chamber, the sergeant stepped closer. Even he could feel the weight now pressing against his armor. His species was built for endurance, but this level was extreme. You were warned, the sergeant said. You will break like the rest. Ethan inhaled slowly. With respect, sir, he replied, this feels similar to weighted field training back home. The sergeant blinked. Weighted? Ethan nodded slightly. We train under extra load to build strength. The word struck harder than the gravity. The sergeant signaled again. 8 units. Alarms flashed red. The chamber groaned loudly. Bolts along the walls began to bend. Sparks fell from the ceiling. Ethan's knees flexed. His shoulders tightened. For a brief second, it looked as if he might finally fall. Several officers leaned forward in anticipation. Instead, Ethan adjusted his stance and straightened. He lifted 1 foot. Then took a step forward. The sound of his boot cracking the floor echoed across the chamber. The sergeant's eyes widened. You are damaging academy property, he growled. Ethan gave a faint smile. Apologies, sir. The remaining conscious cadets watched in disbelief. One whispered weakly, it is not natural. The sergeant refused to accept it. He activated his own armor support systems and stood fully upright. You believe this makes you superior, he demanded. No, sir, Ethan answered calmly. It makes me prepared. The sergeant hesitated only a moment before giving the next order. 10 units. The chamber screamed. Metal warped visibly. Control panels outside began to spark violently. Engineers shouted warnings through communication channels. This exceeds safe limits. The gravity field pulsed again, doubling the crushing force. The sergeant felt his legs tremble. Even with armor assistance, pressure built against his spine. Ethan lowered his head slightly. Silence filled the chamber except for the groaning metal. Then something unexpected happened. Ethan began to walk. Slow. Heavy steps. Each movement was controlled. Deliberate. The sergeant could not move forward. His armor struggled to compensate. Ethan stopped only 1 meter away from him. Permission to continue the test, sir, he asked. The question was respectful. The message was not. Behind the glass, officers watched the live biometrics. Muscle fibers adapting under pressure. Cardiac rhythm stabilizing. He is adjusting in real time. The sergeant realized something terrible. The human was not surviving the gravity. He was adapting to it. A loud explosion of sparks erupted from the chamber ceiling. The core began to overload. Emergency shutdown, engineers yelled. The gravity field flickered violently. For a fraction of a second, the pressure peaked even higher. And still, the human did not kneel. The field collapsed suddenly, returning to normal levels. Cadets gasped for air. Drones rushed in. The sergeant staggered slightly as his armor recalibrated. Ethan rolled his shoulders once. That was intense, he said calmly. Silence filled the academy. The officers behind the glass did not speak. Because they had just witnessed something no training manual had prepared them for. And this had only been the beginning. The gravity field returned to normal, but the silence inside the chamber felt heavier than before. Broken metal plates hung from the ceiling. Smoke drifted through the air. Medical drones carried away unconscious cadets one by one. Only a few remained awake, staring at the human as if he were something unreal. The drill sergeant stood still, his armor slowly powering down. He had not fallen, but he had felt the strain. His pride had felt it too. Ethan stood calmly in the center of the cracked floor. His uniform was soaked with sweat, but his breathing had already slowed. He flexed his fingers once, testing them. Behind the observation glass, senior academy officials entered the control room. Their expressions were not angry. They were calculating. Replay the final 10 seconds, one ordered. The footage appeared again on the main screen. The moment when gravity spiked beyond 10 units. The moment the chamber nearly failed. The moment the human walked. It was not reckless movement, an officer whispered. It was controlled. Analyze muscle response. Numbers filled the screen. His muscle fibers increased density under stress. That is impossible. No. It is biological adaptation. Inside the chamber, the sergeant finally approached Ethan again. This time there was no anger in his steps. Human, he said quietly. Why did you not fall? Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead. On Earth, gravity is stronger than the galactic average, he explained. From childhood, our bones grow under pressure. Our muscles develop to carry our own weight. The sergeant narrowed his eyes. Many worlds have gravity. Yes, sir, Ethan replied calmly. But not all worlds have oceans, mountains, storms, and predators. We evolved with constant resistance. The words were simple. But their meaning was heavy. The academy officials made a decision. Prepare Phase 2, came the command over the speaker. The sergeant looked up toward the control room. Phase 2 requires environmental combat simulation. Correct, the reply came. We must determine his true limit. The chamber doors sealed again. The other cadets were removed, leaving only Ethan and the sergeant inside. Panels along the walls shifted. Hidden emitters extended from the ceiling. The floor reformed into solid reinforced alloy. The sergeant turned back to Ethan. You endured pressure, he said. Now endure motion. Without warning, artificial wind blasted through the chamber at extreme speed. The temperature dropped sharply. Ice formed along the walls. Then the floor tilted violently, forcing both figures to adjust their balance. Ethan planted his feet instinctively. The sergeant activated his armor stabilizers. Gravity, 8 units, the control room announced. The pressure returned, but now combined with movement. Wind roared. The floor shifted like a storm-tossed sea. Ethan's training took over. He lowered his center of gravity. His eyes scanned his environment calmly. His breathing matched the rhythm of the shifting floor. Add resistance obstacles, an officer ordered. Mechanical pillars shot upward randomly across the chamber. Some slammed down toward Ethan at high speed. He dodged. Not perfectly. But effectively. Each step was heavy, yet balanced. Each motion carried strength behind it. The sergeant attacked without warning. A training strike aimed at Ethan's shoulder. Ethan blocked it. The sound echoed sharply in the chamber. The sergeant increased speed, testing reflexes. Ethan responded faster than expected. His reaction time has improved under load, an officer observed. The sergeant stepped back, reassessing. This was no longer about breaking the human. This was about understanding him. Increase gravity to 9 units, came another order. The chamber groaned again. Ethan staggered briefly this time. His knees bent deeper. For the first time, strain showed clearly in his eyes. The sergeant watched carefully. This was the limit. But instead of collapsing, Ethan tightened his stance. He pushed upward against the weight. And he stood fully upright. The officers exchanged silent looks. The human was not simply surviving extreme conditions. He was thriving inside them. The sergeant lowered his arms slowly. End simulation, he ordered. The chamber returned to normal once more. Silence followed. Ethan remained standing. The drill sergeant finally understood something critical. If this was only a single human trainee, what would a full human military unit be capable of? The academy had not tested a weakness. It had revealed a warning. And the galaxy was not ready for what that meant. The chamber doors opened slowly, releasing cold air and smoke into the corridor. Ethan stepped out first. His walk was steady, though his uniform was torn at the sleeves. The drill sergeant followed behind him in silence. Word had already spread through the academy. Cadets lined the upper balconies, watching the human pass. Some stared with curiosity. Others with fear. None with disrespect. Inside the control room, senior officers gathered around a circular table. Holographic data floated above it, bone density charts, muscle fiber scans, neural response speed, recovery rate. One officer pointed at the display. His skeletal structure is 30% denser than galactic average. Muscle recovery speed is abnormal, another added. Microtears repaired almost instantly under stress. A third officer zoomed in on planetary data. Earth gravity, 1.2 standard. But environmental resistance levels are far higher due to atmosphere density and planetary weather systems. The chief instructor folded his hands behind his back. This is not an accident, he said quietly. It is evolution. The drill sergeant entered the room. His heavy footsteps echoed. He did not resist the gravity, the sergeant admitted. He adapted to it. The officers exchanged looks. Can all humans do this? One asked. Unknown, the chief replied. But if even half can. No one finished the sentence. Meanwhile, Ethan sat alone in a quiet preparation room. A medical drone hovered around him, scanning his body. Minor muscle strain, the drone reported. Recovery estimated within 6 hours. Ethan nodded. Understood. The door opened, and the drill sergeant entered. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the sergeant stood straight and said something no cadet had ever heard from him. You exceeded expectations. Ethan looked up. Thank you, sir. The sergeant studied him carefully. Why volunteer for Alien Academy training? He asked. Ethan answered honestly. To understand future allies. And potential enemies. The sergeant considered that. You trained on Earth before coming here. Yes, sir. What is Earth's maximum gravity training level? Ethan paused for a second. We use adaptive chambers, he said calmly. Up to 12 standard units during elite training. The sergeant felt something tighten in his chest. 12, he repeated slowly. And that is not combat, Ethan added. That is preparation. The room grew very quiet. Back in the control room, a new transmission appeared on the main screen. Source, Earth Military Command. All officers froze. Open channel, the chief instructor ordered. A human officer appeared on the hologram. Calm face. Formal uniform. "This is Commander Reyes of the United Earth Defense Force," she said clearly. "We are aware of today's training evaluation." The Academy officers remained silent. "We appreciate your hospitality toward our cadet," she continued. "We also wish to clarify something." The hologram shifted, showing footage of human training facilities. Massive chambers. Soldiers moving under crushing gravity. Combat drills in underwater pressure zones. Storm simulations with extreme winds. Human endurance training begins at higher stress levels than most galactic military programs, Commander Reyes explained. "Not because we expect war, but because we prepare for it." The display returned to her face. "We believe strength is not shown by domination," she said. "It is shown by survival." The transmission ended. The officers remained still. The chief instructor finally spoke. "The galaxy assumes humans are fragile because they lack natural armor," he said. "But armor can be broken." He looked toward the training chamber. "Adaptation cannot." Outside in the corridor, Ethan walked past cadets who stepped aside respectfully. For the first time, they did not see him as different. They saw him as dangerous. Not because he attacked, but because he endured. And deep within the Academy records, a new note was quietly added. Human physiology, high threat potential. Further evaluation required. Because if one trainee could withstand this, the full power of humanity remained unknown. The Academy did not return to normal after that day. Training continued. Drills resumed. Cadets marched through halls and chambers just as they always had. But something had changed. The atmosphere felt different. Heavier. Respect had replaced doubt. Ethan walked through the main corridor toward the final evaluation hall. He could feel the eyes on him, but he did not react. Humans were used to being watched. On Earth, survival had always meant awareness. Inside the central chamber, the senior instructors and Academy command staff waited. This was no longer a test of endurance. This was a formal review. The drill sergeant stood at the front. "Cadet Ethan Cole," he said firmly. "Step forward." Ethan obeyed. "You were subjected to gravity conditions exceeding standard limits," the sergeant continued. "You adapted. You endured. You did not break." A pause followed. "But strength is not measured by resistance alone," the sergeant added. "It is measured by control." The chamber lights shifted. A hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a battlefield simulation. A war between two alien factions. Cities burning. Civilian transports fleeing through debris fields. Military fleets clashing in orbit. "This scenario represents a sector conflict escalating beyond control," the chief instructor explained. "You are given temporary command of a small strike unit. Your objective." Ethan studied the hologram carefully. "Minimize casualties," he answered. "Specify," the instructor pressed. "Both civilian and military," Ethan replied calmly. "End the conflict quickly." Murmurs spread through the chamber. The instructor narrowed his eyes. "You would not destroy the opposing fleet completely?" Ethan shook his head. "If I destroy them entirely, their allies retaliate. The war spreads. If I disable them fast and leave survivors, they remember." The officers exchanged looks. "Remember what?" one asked. "That humans do not seek war," Ethan said quietly. "But we finish it." The hologram shifted. A new projection appeared. It displayed historical data. Ancient galactic conflicts. Human military records from early space expansion. Your species withdrew from the wider galaxy generations ago, the chief instructor said. Many believed you were defeated. Ethan gave a faint smile. We were learning. The room fell silent again. The drill sergeant stepped forward. When gravity increased, you did not panic, he said. When pressure rose, you adapted. Why? Ethan thought for a moment before answering. Because pressure is familiar, he said. On Earth, nature pressures us every day. Storms. Oceans. Predators. Our planet does not allow weakness. He looked around at the alien instructors. We do not train to dominate others. We train to survive anything. One officer leaned forward. And if war comes to this academy? If humanity faces the galaxy itself? Ethan's expression did not change. Then we stand, he said simply. No dramatic tone. No anger. Just certainty. The chief instructor turned off the hologram. Evaluation complete, he announced. Cadet Ethan Cole has demonstrated endurance beyond projected limits and psychological stability under extreme stress. The drill sergeant faced the gathered cadets watching from the balconies. Let this be recorded, he declared. Strength is not size. It is not armor. It is not numbers. He looked directly at Ethan. It is the ability to endure the weight of the universe, and continue walking. The chamber doors opened. Cadets parted respectfully as Ethan exited. From that day forward, academy training protocols were updated. Gravity limits recalculated. Human physiology classified under elite survival category. But a deeper change had occurred. The academy no longer viewed humans as fragile outsiders. They viewed them as a warning. Somewhere far from the academy, Earth continued its quiet existence. Storms moved across its oceans. Mountains stood under heavy skies. Humans trained in silence. The galaxy had tried to measure one human under pressure. And discovered something unsettling. Gravity could not break him. And if gravity could not break humanity, what could?